Hi, in this module of Professor Moylan's Marketing Essentials, we cover marketing ethics. Ethics is one of the ways that society maintains control. Now, the modes of social control, the following factors maintain order and keep people and organizations from running amok: ethics, laws, formal and informal groups, self-regulation, and the media. And let's go ahead and start with the definition of ethical behavior. Ethical behavior, the moral principles or values that generally govern the conduct of an individual or a group. For example, what would be an example of unethical behavior? There is no law for cutting in line, but people don't do it because that wouldn't be ethical. Now, we're talking about ethical marketing behavior, and many people think that that's an oxymoron, that marketing by definition is unethical. Oxymorons being things that are contradictory, like big baby, open secret, alone together, deafening silence, and so on. This concept that marketing itself is unethical was first postulated in 1957 in this book, The Hidden Persuaders, by Vance Packard. Many of us are being influenced and manipulated in the patterns of our everyday lives, that these marketers are forcing you to do things, to buy things that you don't want. Well, this concept continues again and again and again. A more recent book on the topic was Brand Washed: Tricks Companies Use to Manipulate Our Minds and Persuade Us to Buy. This came out in 2011. Well, we're going to start with the premise that marketing is not inherently unethical. However, there are some areas where people can definitely disagree. For example, McDonald's is one of the most successful, well-known companies in the world. Ronald McDonald, their very, very visible spokesperson, but a lot of people think that McDonald's has unhealthy food and that by targeting kids, they lead to bad food choices, and this leads to societal problems like childhood obesity and so on. I don't buy into that. Nobody's holding a gun to anybody's head to eat McDonald's foods, but I think you could probably agree that if you're marketing a product that is not the healthiest, maybe it's not a great idea to aggressively market that to kids. That certainly is an argument that many people have brought against the soft drink companies, Pepsi and Coke, especially when they very, very aggressively did things like put soda machines in schools. Clearly, they're targeting kids with soda machines in schools. This is not the healthiest product, but in small doses, there's certainly nothing wrong with it. Although some people think that a lot of times these soft drink marketers get people to consume soft drinks as opposed to consuming something healthier like water. Share a Coke with no one, human rights before profit. Coke goes in and harms water supplies and so on. Well, I don't buy into that at all. But one thing that you might, from an ethical standpoint, talk about is the price and how much profits Coke makes, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Here's another company that has been accused of unethical behavior, Hooters. That they used sexist appeals to try to sell food and beverage. In fact, launching this entire segment of the restaurant industry that's often referred derisively as the breastaurant segment. Credit cards and credit card issuers, especially those that target people like students that maybe are probably going to have a good credit history and therefore qualify, but maybe will not use the credit card in the wisest way and therefore rack up lots and lots and lots of fees and interest charges. College. Some people think that colleges are not always the most ethical with regard to what their tuition fees are. I'm not going to get into that, but one area that's an offshoot of this is college athletics. The United States of college football. Many, many colleges generate enormous revenues that come from the hard work of the student athletes. that are in there. Others say, well, that's crazy. People are really rooting for the uniforms, not the student athlete. And if one student athlete didn't come, he or she would be replaced by another student athlete. Another argument that many make is, yes, there are several revenue sports like football and basketball, but they largely fund all of the non-revenue sports, which is the great majority of all the student athletes out there. How about products like the iPhone? Here's the iPhone 7 options on Apple's website. How much does that iPhone cost if you buy it straight from Apple? Well, it depends on, how much storage capacity there is. But let's go ahead and go with the very, very cheapest one, the 32 gig that sells for $769. Now, you pay Apple $769 for that, assuming you don't buy that as part of a commitment with a service provider. What does that cost Apple to make that iPhone that they're going to sell you for $769? Well, their average cost of goods sold is 61%. So that iPhone that cost $769 to you only costs Apple $468 to make. I mentioned Coke a minute ago. They've got even fatter profit margins than Apple. If you buy a Coke for $1, it's probably going to be more than that, but let's just make the math simple and call it $1. How much does it cost Coke to make that bottle of Coke that you pay $1 for? 39.4 cents. They've got 39% cost of goods sold. Wow, that's really profitable. Does anybody make even greater profits than that? Hey, let's talk about big pharma. Pfizer is the biggest pharmaceutical company in the United States with revenues of $53 billion. They make products that you may have heard of or seen advertised like Lipitor, Zoloft, Lyrica, and obviously they spend a lot of money advertising those products. Now, that product that and I'll just make up a number here to make the math easy. Let's say you spend $25 on that prescription pharmaceutical. How much does it cost Pfizer to make that prescription pharmaceutical that you pay $25 for? Well, on average, they've got a 23% cost of goods sold, so that cost them $5.82. The balance, almost $20, goes to gross profit. That's a 23%, cost of goods sold. But the thing about gross profit is they still have to take out research and development costs. They wouldn't have those drugs to sell to you if they hadn't spent enormous amounts in R&D and so on. Of course, there truly are what I would consider to be unethical marketers. What I would consider to be the unethical marketers are those that market products that really don't do what they say they're going to do. A lot of times these are products that are advertised on infomercials, products like Tummy Tuck, Miracle Slimming System, Slim Away Belly Fat with the Tummy Tuck Slimming System, or here's one that's even worse, Perfect Smile Veneers. You look at those before and after pictures, crazy. At some point you have to wonder, hey, let the buyer beware. Anybody that sees an ad like this and actually spends their money deserves to get fleeced. But I would argue that unethical marketers are those marketers that do sell products or try to sell products that do not perform as advertised. Most companies are ethical. In fact, most companies try to have ethical guidelines for their employees to follow. That's often called a code of ethics for employees to look at. Now, a code of ethics helps to identify acceptable business practices, helps to control employee behavior internally, tries to avoid confusion in decision making, and helps the discussion along, facilitates discussion about right and wrong. If you are a company that is in the United States but also operates in other countries, you've got an ethical issue with regard to a U.S. law called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, because the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act prohibits U.S. corporations from making illegal payments to foreign officials. Well, why would that be a bad thing? Well, this has been criticized for putting U.S. businesses at a disadvantage because in many instances, the companies that they're competing with are not following those guidelines, and so they have, a leg up, if you will. There's lots of ethical issues in marketing, and many companies will have that internal code of ethics to try to guide employee behavior.